Hi, and welcome to Dime's Block of the Month. This is the On Point block. I'm PJ Wong, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how to put this block together. We're going to do the piecing with Dime's My Block Piecer, and then we'll do the embellishments with my Quilt Embellisher. So here's a picture of the block. This is a picture of the actual stitched out block, and then a couple of different layout options. So this is the same block in the previous picture, just in a setup with 9 blocks in the layout, with the blocks rotated. This is using all the same corner, the fabrics in the corner all the same, and you end up getting kind of a secondary block in the middle. And then this final image shows it basically will show you a little bit better the corner motif creates its own motif in the secondary block when you can actually see the stitching a little bit more. So I'm just going to go back through here and get back to our actual block. Okay, so I'm going to switch over now to my block piecer and we'll get going. Okay, so we're in My Block Piecer, and of course the first thing that you're going to see when you open up your software is your My Inspiration Today page. Any new information will be right here in the center section, and then of course don't forget to download your free monthly designs. I'm going to just close this out now and then we'll get started. So for the On Point block, I'm actually going to use some software that's already in the system. So I'm going to go up here to the Quilt block icon, and I'm going to go down here to someplace in here. There is the On Point blocks. Actually, it's diamond in a square. There we go. So here we are with our diamond in a square, and I'm just going to choose this. And it's going to default to the 8x8 size. I'm actually going to be doing a 7x7 block because that will, with the seam allowances, will fit in my 8x8 hoop. So I'm just going to choose custom here from the drop down, and then in here I'm just going to type in my 7 and I'm going to say okay. So here is our artwork, and it's going to come in automatically centered. And I've got my grid set up to inches, and if I right click up here in my ruler, in the grid settings it's got it, I think this is the default at ½ an inch, which is fine, and I'm showing my grid as lines. Since we're not actually creating artwork in this because the artwork is already done for us, for right now the grid in this particular scenario isn't that important, so I'm just going to say okay to that. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is actually put my fabrics in here so that I can see what I'm working with. So you've got colors in here now. I'm going to actually choose fabric so that I can see what my actual block will look like. So I'm just starting with the center section. So you've got 2 different places that you can get your fabrics. You can either go up here to select fabric. This is also the same, it will get you to the same place. So hit the little dots and it'll get you there, and if you go here it brings you up to that same menu. So I've got my fabrics loaded, and this is the beach sewing collection, and for that center I want just a white on white, and if I go down here I've got white scissors. So, and if I click off, you'll be able to see the image a little bit better. And right now I'm going to turn off my grid. So there's our scissor fabric. So filling in the corners, you've got a couple of options. If you're going to do yours so that they're all one color, you can choose all of your corners at the same time. And I could simply do that by choosing over here on my sequence bar. I could just choose this header and that will select everything all at one time. I can go back into my fabrics and then choose whichever fabric I'd like. So if, say, we're going to do purple checks, I could just choose that. I'm going to undo that now because I'm actually going to do separate colors on each of my corners. So once again, and this will remember where you were the last time. So I'm already in beach sewing and at my purple check, so I'm going to add that. And then I'm just clicking on the different patches to add my different colors. And this one is going to be green. So there's my green check. And this one is yellow, so there's my yellow check, and then the top one is the pink check. Okay, so I've got all of my fabrics in there to preview, and I can see exactly what my block is going to look like. So I'm going to select everything. So I'm just going to left press and drag at the top left, and I'm dragging down to the bottom right to select everything. You could also select from your sequence bar over here. You could also do a Control A with your keyboard. It will all do the same thing, which is selecting all. So I'm going to go into my workflow button, and you're going to see your block right here. The first thing that I'm going to do is change my hoop, and I am going to make this my Baby Lock Brother 200 by 200, which is basically the 8 by 8 hoop. So, and I want my seam allowances checked, and I'm going to change my seam allowances to 0.375. It just gives a little bit more wiggle room than the 1/4 inch does, but it's your choice which seam allowance to use. And then I'm just going to choose auto build. And it's going to sort this out, and you can then sort your numbers so that they're actually going in the correct order. And this is going to build 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5. And I can simply choose preview. So this is actually going to be all the stitching lines for your patches. And I'm just going to save that. So by default, I think that your system is going to automatically go into C and then Dime Designs. And then you have these pre-built folders here. I've created a folder that says block of the month. So I'm going to put this in here. And I'm going to call this 01 on point. And I like to put what seam allowance I'm using just to make sure I know to not confuse anything else. So I'm going to put 375. All right, and I'm just going to say save to that. And you will get a preview of what all's been saved. And you can see right here, this is going into your local, your C drive, Dime Designs. Here's the folder that I had created earlier, and then your on point. This is the name of the folder. These are the contents in the folder. This is your piecing file, and then here's your artwork. And then this is the PDF preview, and it will show you a picture of your block. Once again, your actual stitching to put your pieces together. And then your step-by-step walkthrough of exactly which pieces go where and exactly what each step is going to be doing on that. So this is a really handy dandy little piece of information. And when I walk you through how to actually put the block together, you'll recognize this section because I've added that into the other instructions as well, so that you can keep on track and you can use all of this documentation. Okay, so I'm just going to close that down, and I'm going to close this. Okay, so for cutting your parts, you're going to want to select everything and then go up here to your cutter function. And then here, depending on how you're actually going to cut is going to determine how this part is going to get set up. So the first thing that I want to do is change my seam allowance to 3/8 of an inch, because you want that to match up with whatever you did on your piecing section, because otherwise your parts and your embroidery functions are not going to match up correctly. So under the hoop, if you are going to just print the patterns out and then hand cut them, or you could rotary cut them also, you would want to go down here and you would want to choose paper and either letter or legal, whichever your printer can handle. So I'm just going to choose letter for this, and it's going to show me, you can put in your width of fabric, and what it will do is it will give you all of your patches. So here's my center and here's my sides, and it's going to show your images. Okay, and you could simply just say apply. That will apply everything, and then save. And if you've got it set to letter, it's automatically going to send it out as a PDF. So here I'm going to go into that same folder I was using before, the on point, and I'm going to call this cut files, and I'm just going to say save to that, and it will then actually print that out as a PDF. So if I go in here to my PDF and look at this, so here's just a preview. So here's my center patch, and then here are all of my corners with the numbers on them. And you also get a preview of that. So you'll get a preview of your actual block, and then it'll show you how much, this is how much fabric you're actually needing. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to move that back out of the way. If you have a digital cutter, and that's how you'll be cutting your parts, you can choose, there are different mats in here depending on which cutter you have. So here's like the Brother Scan and Cut. So say you have the 12 by 24 mat. If you choose this, where this comes in really handy is if you're doing a number of blocks. So when I did the PDF, I just left it at one block because I'm going to use that same pattern to cut as many pieces as I need. But say you were going to make 3 or 4 blocks or even more. If I change my repeats to 4, and when I apply this, you'll see what happens because it will fit multiple parts onto that long mat. So it's able to fit 3 of those parts in, and the second one there would be 1, and then on this I can get multiple parts in here. So this is all of my parts for each 4 of my blocks. So if you have an electronic cutter, that's pretty handy. And then here again you can simply say save, and again cutter files, and I'm going to call this one if I can spell digital cut, and it will save that as a C2S file. All right, and then I can just close this, and once again it will give you all of your pieces, and it will give you a preview of that. So these are basically everything that we saw on the other in the preview right there. Does that make sense? There we go. Okay, so with the C2S file, what you can do is if you were to open that, you can then send that out to your cutter. And I should be able to open that file up here, and here's my C2S. So here's the image of it, and open. And then I can simply go out here and say save as, and most cutters will take a SVG file. It kind of just depends on your cutter, but you should be able to go down here and scalable vector graphics, which is what an SVG file is. If your cutter doesn't take SVG, it should take a DXF, but one of those two should work. Okay, so then you could just choose to save this as a SVG and then save, and away you go. Okay, so that's the cutter part of it. And we're good to go. We're done with all of the parts for my block piecer. Okay, so we're in my Quilt Embellisher now, and once again you're going to open up your software and you'll see the My Inspiration Today page. All the new information that we want to show you is going to be right here, and then of course don't forget your free designs. So I'm just going to close that down. So I am going to open up a new page, and I'm going to go to my library. Now it should remember where you were the last time, and again it should be defaulting to your designs. And here is my folder, and here, this is the folder that I created for block of the month, and then here's my first block. So if this information isn't showing up, if you just simply choose the designs and right click and say refresh, anything new from the last time you were there that was added is going to automatically refresh. It'll update the system. So I'm just going to go into here, and here is my on point block, and this is the artwork that I want. So I'm just going to drag this in. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and right click, and I'm going to say center origin. So now my 0 points are down the center and at the halfway point, which is exactly what I want. Okay, so I have my grid set up at 1/4 of an inch because I'm going to use that as a guideline to set up my designs. To set your grid settings, if you just right click up in your ruler bar, here's your grid settings, and I've got mine at 1/4 of an inch. You can also do this, the show in front of design. This is basically your grid showing in front of your design, which I have here. If that is checked off, it's harder to see your grid. And in our case, we're actually going to want to be able to know where that is. So I'm just going to turn that back on. Okay, so we're ready to go now. Couple things. If you want to make your zero lines easier to see, you can do what's called a guideline. So I'm just going to come up here to the top and I'm going to left click. Actually, I'm left pressing and I'm dragging and I'm bringing that down to my zero line. When it hits the zero line or any of the lines on the grid, your guideline will temporarily disappear, but when you let go, it will actually be a solid blue line. So you can do that going down the front or the halfway and then also down the center. Basically, it's both of your centers. So that just helps you visualize things a little bit better. So I'm going to start creating our motif that we're going to use for our embellishment, and I'm going to click back really quick to our picture of the actual block. So this marquee shape is the basis for all of the embellishments that are done on this block. So I'm going to start by creating that marquee shape. So back to embellisher, and to get that marquee shape I'm starting with a diamond. So I'm just selecting the diamond shape and I'm just going to drag a diamond out. Right now I'm not that worried about the actual shape of the diamond. We'll adjust as we need here. Okay, so I want it to fall 1/2 of an inch from the top. Actually, maybe I want it 1/4 of an inch from the top here. Okay, and then I want it, I may have to go in and adjust this more later, but for the time being I'm just going to go with that shape. So it is 2 inches wide. Yep, because these are 1/4 inch grids. Okay, and 1/4 of an inch from the top and 1/4 of an inch from the center. So to turn the diamond into a marquee, I'm going to use my shape tool. And I'm just going to select the node. I'm going to single click to select the node and then right click and tell that to be symmetrical. And then you can do the same thing on this side. And now you have a marquee instead of a diamond. I'm going to undo that and show you that you can also select, if it's easy to select all the nodes that you need to change at the same time, if it's easy to select them with a drag, you can do that as well. So now both of those nodes have been selected and I can just right click and say symmetrical. It'll just save you a couple clicks in the long run. Okay, so there is basically my marquee shape. And again, if we look at the picture, I think that's pretty close to the same shape. So I'm going to go with that. All right, so we just need to turn that now into a run line. So I'm going to go up here to our convert to run. And if I switch back to my sequence view, I can expand this, and so that's a run stitch now. If you turn on your realistic view, it's a little easier to see when those actually convert from artwork into stitches. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to tell it that I want that to be a bean stitch, and I'm going to give it a 4mm length just to make it kind of like a hand stitch look, a little bit heavier. So, okay. Oh, you know what? One of the things that I didn't do when I first brought this in, I centered my artwork, but then I usually lock this. It's a good idea to lock your artwork because you're really using that as a reference and you don't want to accidentally move it. And if you didn't realize that you moved it, you could be setting up all your designs following that artwork. And if it had been moved, your designs are not going to end up being where you'd expect them to be. So if you lock that, it will kind of save all of that. So, all right, back to our little marquee here. I'm going to go into the shape tool and I'm going to look and see where my stops and starts are. when you're creating motifs like this, one of the things that you want to pay attention to is the run order or the sequence. And you want everything to run nice and smoothly and have as few jumps and ties as possible. So that's what this part of the sequence is all about. So the red dot is where you're going to stop here, and the green dot is where you're going to start. So in this case, I want to stop and start down at the bottom point. And it will make sense here in a minute why I'm doing that. A lot of times you want that to be the closest point, and strangely enough, this will end up being the closest point. So there's my shape. I've set it to stop and start down here at the bottom. So I basically need 4 of these. So I am just gonna, with that selected, I'm just gonna say copy paste. So now there's 2. You can see here's the first one and the second one. And then I'm just gonna rotate that. So the clicks basically go in 45-degree increments. So I'm just clicking twice to get that to 90 degrees. And then I'm just going to drag that into place. And then I'm just going to do that for the next 2. I'm just going to copy paste, rotate, rotate. Oh, I have to rotate more times. Copy and paste. And rotate, rotate. All right, so I've got all of my 4 pieces in there, which is exactly what I'm wanting. So now, if we look back at the picture again, you can see, and it might be a little hard to see, but right here, see these there's little joining stitches that are going in between my little marquees. That's so that when this runs, it can run all as one piece, one section of stitching, as opposed to stopping and starting. So if this were to run right now, it would run here, it would stop and start here and tie off. And then it would either jump or trim depending on your machine, but you would either have a lot of jumps or a lot of trims. So to alleviate that, we're going to add little connectors. So I'm just going to go up here to my run, and standard and 3, that's fine. I can actually go ahead and change this right now to the bean stitch and tell it yes, 3 repeats, and I want it the same stitch length as the other. So I'm going to say 4. Okay. And then I'm simply going to left click and then right click, and it's going to add that little connector in. I'm going to change my thread color here. We'll end up changing it all back to one color at the end, but for the time being, if you do this in a separate color, it will make it easier to understand what's going on. So back to my run stitch. So once again, left click, right click. Oops, I forgot to apply that. We'll change that in a second. Left click, right click, left click, right click. All right, I need to select these again, and all right, so there's all of our little connectors in a separate color. So up here, we've got our section of marquees, and then we've got our runs. Okay, so basically what needs to happen is you need to have a run section in between each of your marquees. So I'm just going to select my first run segment, and I'm going to drag it up to the first marquee, and I'm going to let go. So now it's going to run it's going to do the marquee, and then it's going to do the run. So for all the rest of these little run connectors, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just dragging them up so that they're sitting in between the marquees. So if we look at the live view now and we actually do a simulate, so it's going to do our marquee and then our run, marquee, run, marquee, run. Okay, it looks kind of funny because they're different colors, but we're going to change all of that here directly. So I'm going to select my top marquee, and I'm holding down my control key, and I'm going to select, my shift key, and I'm going to select all of that. And then I'm just going to right click to turn that all into the same color. Okay, so now next thing I want to do to make this run more smoothly, I'm going to come up here to my command icon, and it's just telling me color number 1. So the start command is normal, the end command I want to be normal, and the tie in and the tie off, right now I want them all to say none, and I'm going to simply apply there. Okay, So now I'm going to select the first one and go back to my commands and tell it I want the first one to tie in, and I'm just going to tell it to be a basic tie-in. And then I'm going to go to my last one and tell it I want it to tie off. Whoops, off, basic, and apply. So now basically what's going to happen is when this runs, instead of stopping and starting and tying on and tying off, it's going to tie on once when it starts and then run through all of this until it gets to the end, and then there will be one tie off at the end. So you won't have a bunch of jumps and you won't have a bunch of trims. Okay. All right. So now that we've got that all set up, I'm going to select all of that, and to me, I find this easiest to do from the sequence bar over here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to tell that to group. Okay. While it's still selected, I'm going to choose copy and paste. You could again use a Control V, Control C, I did that backwards, Control C, Control V. So I've got my two groups here. I'm going to turn the second one a different color. I'm going to choose orange, and then I'm going to rotate that. So since we did most of the setup on the first one, on the second set of motifs, really all we need to do is just adjust this, because this is going into our corner and we really want it to end down here. Okay, so I am going to go in here and I'm going to ungroup this so that I can get to my sections. I'm going to choose my, oops, accidentally moved that. I'm going to choose my section. I'm going to go to my shape tool. I'm going to single click up at that top point node, and I'm going to tell it I want it to be symmetrical, which is going to round it out, and then I'm going to drag it down. And I'm using, here's my corner. I'm kind of just eyeballing that, but I am using my grid right here to get that aligned correctly. Okay, so then I can just simply go to my next one and do that same thing. So single left click to select the node, select symmetrical, and then I'm just dragging this down into position. And then you can just click off to see if that's exactly where you want it. And then you're just going to continue to do that to all of the rest of the points. So symmetrical, and then move that into position. And then the very last one, single left click to select, right click, choose symmetrical, and then drag that down into position. Okay. So now I'm just going to double check that these are set up with the stops and starts. We didn't change anything, so it should technically still all be fine. So this top one is tied in. All your middle ones should be normal, normal, none, none, and they are. And then the last one should have a tie off. So perfect. All right. So that's exactly what we're looking for. If you want to get everything back into your viewing screen, if you just double left click on your zoom, it'll center everything. This also might be a good time to save this because you've done quite a lot of work here. So, all right. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to put this into the same spot where all of my other information is for this block. So I'm going to my C, dime, and you can choose where you want to save this, but I'm trying to keep all my stuff together. So here's my on point block. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to copy that, but then change this part, and I'm just going to name this EMB because this is the embellishment part. So I'm going to say okay to that. All right. So now I'm going to start working on my corner motif. So the corner motif actually starts with that same marquee that we started from the very beginning. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to ungroup that top section so that I can get a hold of one of these. I just need that one. The other thing that I need to do is I need to get one of these corners so that I understand where I need to build my motif. So I'm going to unlock that initial group, and I'm going to choose just one of these, and I need to ungroup that as well. So here's just one piece of that artwork, and then holding down the control key and I'm choosing my marquee. All right, so I've got that one piece of artwork and one marquee. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open a new page, and I'm going to paste. So these are the two pieces that I copied from before. Okay, so the reason that I've copied this is because this is going to end up going into here. And once again, if we look back at our picture, I think this one might be the easiest to see. This motif just sits right here in the corner. So I actually copied this purple section. It might have been easier to copy the yellow one. We can change that. All right, let's come back to here. And I think that I will. So I'm just going to go into here, and I'm going to go into my fabrics, and I'm going to tell this I want this one to be the yellow check, just because it will be easier to see this, I think, on it. All right. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this so that it's sitting upright, because it will be much easier to build our design upright than it will be on the 45, and it will be very easy to rotate it when we need to put it into position. So I've got my triangle selected for my art, that's my artwork, and I'm going to tell it to center the origin. Okay, so I'm going to turn my realistic view back on because I just think it's easier to see what's going on with that. All right, so I'm going to double check my grid settings here, and we are still at 1/4 of an inch. And I think I'm just going to leave that for the time being. I think we'll be okay. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to set this to 1/4 of an inch. And if you are dragging from your corner handles, see my little diagonal arrow, it's going to scale that proportionally. So I'm bringing that down to the 1/4 of an inch here. And then I'm just going to move that back to the center. Okay. So I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. So our side motifs, or our bottom motifs that go down here like this, once again, looking at the picture, these little guys right here, it's just a half of that guy. So we're gonna create that. So I am going to actually pull this in just a little bit and make it a little bit skinnier. Okay, so I'm gonna copy that and paste it, and then I'm gonna rotate it. So this is going to end up going here, and I'm setting it off of this just a little tiny bit. So this is going below our triangle, which we don't really want to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit this shape. I'm just going to go into shape. I'm going to select this node, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say delete point. And when you click off of that, you'll see now we've got the half of the marquee, which is perfect. I'm going to select that. I'm switching back to my select tool. I'm going to copy that and paste it, and then I'm going to mirror it to get it going in the other direction. So the reason I mirrored it is that my stop and my start should be down here at the bottom. If I mirrored it, I would have had to gone back in and move my stop and start. So it seems kind of funny to do that, but it usually ends up working out better that way. So I'm just going to move that in between. You know what? I'm actually going to go in and change my grid. So in my grid settings, I'm going to change this, turn on my maintain aspect ratio, so only have to do this once, to 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and I'll zoom in on this a little bit. So these should now be sitting at 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to move this little guy up. All right. So now all we have to do is build our little side guys here that go in the middle. So with this selected, I'm simply going to copy and paste, and I'm going to rotate that once, and I'm going to move it into position here. And then once again, it's going past, so I am simply going to, on the diagonal, just scale that down. And it will hold that proportionally. I'm going to say that's pretty good. We'll let it bounce to that grid mark. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to copy and paste, and then I'm going to rotate to the right twice, and then pop that little guy right into there. So basically there's our motif. If we hide the block, you can see exactly what that looks like. We've kind of got a big mess going on here because we haven't ordered these into the right position yet. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first thing that we want to stitch is this one, and we really want to go from the left to the right. So, or you could go from the right to the left, as long as they're going in order, it really doesn't matter. So we're going to go here, 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 and here. So our first item is here, and it's actually way down here. So this needs to go up to the top. So there's our first one, and there's our second one. So I'm just dragging these up into position. Our third one should be in position. There's our fourth one, and here's our fifth one. Okay? So now you can see that when these run, and you're going to have a very small jump stitch here. This is only an 1/8 of an inch, and most of your machines will not even trim that, but it will look like a jump stitch. So, but it's not something that you have to go in and trim. So if we were to actually run this now, you can see that it's running exactly the way that we want it to run. Okay. So last thing to double check is how our commands are running. So we have got normal, normal. Oh, because we copied the one that had the basic on it, the tie-in, we need to change these. So these should all be none to start with. And then on your first one, you're going to tie in. And on your last one, you'll tie off. That should be pretty familiar. Okay, so we're just going to group these all together. Oops, right click, group. And I'm going to turn these a different color. I'm trying to think if there were any colors that we didn't have. Let's choose a light color. All right, we may want to change that once we get back to our other page. So you could go ahead and save this motif if you think that you're going to use it again. I'm just going to go back in here and do save as, and I'm going to say corner motif and save. And it remembered where I was, so I'm still in my on point block. So save. All right. And then I can copy this, and I can switch tabs back here to my embellishment chunk. I'm going to group again. Oops, sorry. Take that back. I'm going to group my artwork back together again and lock it. You can collapse that. All right. And you can group this back together just in case you want to change all your colors at the same time. It's easiest if those are in fact grouped. Okay, so I still have my corner embellishment in my clipboard, so I'm just going to say paste, and here's my corner embellishment. So all I'm going to do is rotate that, and then I'm just going to drag that little guy up here into position, and it should fit right there. I'm going to turn that a darker color, hopefully, so that you can actually see. Dark green. There we go. All right. So again, still on my clipboard, but I could just copy and paste, and then once again rotate, rotate, and move that into position. Once you've got both of them on there, you could either copy, paste, rotate, rotate, and do the next two, or since you've got half of them done, you could select both of those, copy, paste, and then you could mirror and then drag into position. That will just save you a couple of extra clicks. There you go. So that is your embellishment all done. So once again, probably good time to save. So I've saved that. Okay. So I'm going to go back and pick up the piecing part, and I'm going to open up that file, and here I've got the file. So one of the things that I'm going to add to this is a basting border, which this will hold your block together initially before you stitch your very first set of stitches, your your placement stitch before you stitch your placement stitch. So I'm just going to choose my rectangle. I'm actually going to go down here. I'm going to add another color that is not any of the existing colors that I'm currently using. Crocus, that works. So right click, and then I'm going to go up here to my rectangle, and I am going to use my cursor, and I just want to follow this inside line. And I'm just gonna, I'm left pressing and dragging, and I'm going out until my cursor is just matching that line, and then I'm gonna let go. And so now I have this box, this yellow box. If I measure that, it should come in at 7.12, 7.13. It's just slightly larger than your 7-inch block, and that's gonna be the outside stitching of all of your tack down piece, your tack down placement lines, or your, sorry, not your tack down placements, your tack down lines. All right, so we want this, we're going to end up sewing that first, but I'm going to put it at the very end of the sequence so that it doesn't throw off your other numbers, and I'll explain that a little bit more in just a second. So here's all of our information. So we've got that now. And I'm going to go back to my embellishment, and what I want to do now is I want to pick up all my embellishment pieces, but I don't necessarily need my artwork. So I'm just going to start with the first section of my embellishment and hold down the shift key and select the last group of my embellishment. So I'm going to say copy to this. I'm going to go back to my piecing part, and I'm going to paste that, and it will paste that below the block you just made. And actually we're going to make 2 of those blocks, so that block can stay exactly where it is, and then we're going to do another one. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste that. So we're going to have one there and one here, and in reality I'm going to undo that, because what I should have really done was, sorry, this piece of artwork is really a run stitch, so we just need to do our convert to run and turn that into a run stitch. And it doesn't need to be a bean, it should just be a standard stitch, and it is a basting stitch, so it can in fact be a 4 millimeters. Okay, so then now I'm going to copy and paste, and I'm going to put this one at the very bottom. So you're going to end up with 2 different run borders that are exactly the same. Okay, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this now using the slow redraw to explain exactly why we've done what we've done here. Okay, so this run stitch that is actually at the end of your design will stitch, you'll go to the end and stitch that first. What that basting stitch is going to do is going to keep your base block or bottom block and your top block together in your monster block maker. When you physically do it, it might make a little bit more sense. It might be a little bit confusing now. So just know that it will all work out in the end. Okay, so we're going to run through this. So it's going to stitch, you'll stitch that last thing first, and then it will go into this. And this is all of your placement lines. I'm going really fast. That is going to be the tack down for your first patch, which is placed face up. And then all of your seaming and all of your tacking stitches are next. Then once you get all of your piecing done, you would place your fancy back fabric on the back side of your monster block maker so that you can quilt through that piece. So this basting border that we're going to run right here is going to tack that into place. Then it's going to go into your embellishment, and your embellishment will be stitching through the fancy back fabric and your batting, because your batting's already in place. Okay, so it's just going to run through all of that. And then that very last basting border you can actually just skip. So the reason that I've done it that way, and it seems kind of weird and out of order, if I put this final basting border up at the very start, all of your numbers would end up being off. But this way, all these are going to end up running they'll be the same order as they are here because it'll be number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. If we put that basting border up at the start where it really should be stitching, all of your numbers would be one off, and it would end up getting even more confusing than stitching the last thing first. So once you do that a couple times, it won't seem so confusing. So at any rate, so that basically is all of there is to the embellishments. And we can just save this now. And when I save this, I usually save this as all, because to me that is all of the block. So I'll save that as all. I've got my basting and my piecing and my embellishment in there. And then I can save this as my machine format. So I can go back in here and I can do save as, and there's the machine format right there. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for the on point block. We'll see you next month.